hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of Calendar. I'm Timothy Oliphant.
And I'm Timothy Berkowitz.
And we are very, very happy to announce a special guest. We've talked about having this gentleman on before. He is a very dear friend of mine and Mr. Berkowitz.
Yep.
We've known him for, I would say, 6 years now. We worked together for 4 years. But welcome to the show, Brent Larrabee.
Hey.
Hi, Timothy, it's Brent Lackey.
Brent, Brent Lackey. Brent Lackey.
Oh, right.
We worked together for 4 years. I did know that. Mr. Brent was the inspiration for this podcast. I remember.
True.
I remember that day very clearly. I was just talking your ear off repeatedly about the joys of calendaring, how Mr. Berkowitz and I have just really, it has just changed our lives. And what was it that inspired you to suggest this podcast?
Well, I just thought that if it was something that you enjoyed so much, that maybe it was something that you should devote more time to and less time to some of the things like at work you just didn't seem as interested in. And I felt like you just seemed really passionate about this. And I honestly, the first time really hearing about calendaring as a hobby, I thought, well, if I need to know more, maybe others do too.
Well, I appreciate that because we both have felt like everyone needs to know about this, and we've been dedicating most of our lives to it for quite a while. So when you suggested that I quit my job working for you and go do this professionally, I can't tell you how excited I was about that. What was it that inspired you to convince me that I should quit that job and do this?
Well, honestly, I felt like your I'd rather you do something that made you happy and that you enjoyed. And I feel like there was some conflicts at work anyway that maybe could be resolved better by you pursuing this passion.
Well, I appreciate that. That does make sense. And
you did, Tim, you did tend to monopolize is a bad word, but you spoke quite a bit in many of our meetings at the office.
Yes, I did. I was guilty of that. I would find that in meetings, people would have just poor calendaring skills, and
oh yes,
it was very irritating. And I knew that if I could just share with them what I knew and how I handled things, that things might get a little bit better for them. So I do think this is a better career path for me. I also feel like my experience at that company has contributed to this because we worked for 4 years at a paper company that.
You worked at a paper company before you worked with me?
No,
we worked in healthcare.
What?
We worked in healthcare.
The place downtown where we worked is healthcare?
Yeah. Yes.
We use paper. We use paper a lot.
You said that we did not work at a paper company. That surprises me a little bit because I don't know if you've heard of the TV show The Office.
Yeah.
A lot of what went on in that company when I was there seemed like that TV show, and I guess I just assumed that that's what we were doing. But that's a bit surprising to me. 4 years, giving 4 years of your life to a company and then finding out that they were actually healthcare, that's surprising to me.
Yeah.
But
I never saw a doctor while we were there.
I never saw a doctor there. I did go to a lot of doctor appointments, though. A lot.
Yeah. Well,
there were weeks I feel like I was away from the office more than I was there.
I can agree with that.
That still holds true with the calendaring. I think I take a lot more breaks than I do work. So what advice would you give? I have some questions written down here that
We call those vacays or vacations in the calendaring biz.
we do. Just little mini vacays.
Right.
So what advice would you give to someone who was just starting out to get into the paper business, the healthcare business?
I guess based upon this conversation, the advice would be to research well the business you're getting into to understand your part in it.
That would have helped me.
That's a good point. Maybe second only to good scheduling on a calendar.
Or maybe first.
Oh, well, sure.
I'm surprised no one asked me about that experience in my interview.
I am too, now that you mention it.
So I want to take a side detour here. Today is also a special day for another reason. Today I have it written on my calendar in very small letters because it's not a major holiday, but it is celebrated by several different cultures. Today is Sock Hat Solidarity Day. And because my dear friend Timothy Berkowitz is always wearing a sock hat, I wanted to join in the sock hat fun and also wear a sock hat with him. And
it did not go unnoticed.
Well, I appreciate that. I apologize, Mr. Brent, that I did not let you in on that little surprise.
Yeah, I was not on my calendar, unfortunately.
So how much calendaring have you done on your own time?
Well, most of my calendaring is more professional, a work calendar, Outlook. We do have a calendar in the home for some family related things, but I think that's the extent of what I would say calendaring wise that goes on in my life. Obviously from the experiences you shared with me at work, it sounds like yours goes a lot beyond that.
It really does. Honestly, I think it would have helped me at the job if I would have kept a work calendar. All of my
good advice. That's probably number one.
That is probably number one. I
think Brett would agree with us.
I look back on that now, and I think of all of the meetings I wouldn't have missed. The one big thing it would help me with is knowing what the topic of the meeting was going into the meeting.
That's a pro tip.
It is.
That's more than just a regular. That's a pro tip.
Yeah, and we have that in our work calendars. Yes, I think the problem was because you like to be more hands-on your calendar and you were making your own with all the materials you bring in every day. We have the digital version in Outlook that captured all that for you, and it probably just wasn't getting moved over to the one you were creating.
Well, I'm not a big fan of digital calendars. I tried using them at one point, but I use these Post-it notes. They're little tabs, and I can write on there what I'm going to do for that day. Those are good. Whenever I would stick those to the digital calendar, it would not keep track of it. It was very difficult to have to consistently move those. If I made any orientation change on my screen, very frustrating.
Right. Well, I hear this a lot, especially from people that don't like to be hands-on, that digital is the way to go. I think it's a fad. I think it
is a passing fad. I've heard
in 2 years, maybe 3 years, we're not going to hear about digital calendars ever again.
I think the only reason that it has held on as long as it has is because you see it in television and movies a lot.
Yeah.
It's almost all they talk about when, or all that you see. No one's really ever talked about calendaring in movies, and the way that we do it, which is far superior, I feel.
Of course.
I feel would have a good place in media, whether that's social or television or
a documentary. We've talked about that before.
A documentary.
A documentary would be
a documentary.
In fact, now that you mention it, just briefly, I did go back and watch some of that Tiger Boss or whatever it was called that you told me about. I will tell you what, that man is a man that I could relate to. He's an entrepreneur. He
knew business.
He did. He saw something and he just took the bull by the horns, the tiger by the tail, whatever you want to say. But you know who I feel is really the unsung hero of that series? I didn't watch it all, but I feel like
the Tigers.
Well, sort of. I mean, they're in the title, but I feel like that Howard Baskin fella, I could really relate to him. I mean, he is just a stand-up guy. He was vibrant. He was dynamic. Oh, he was a joy to watch.
Watching him, I feel like he had earned a lot of respect in that field, primarily because of everything he had to deal with his wife. I mean, she seemed very outgoing, very positive and forward-thinking, but it seemed like she did not have a lot of time for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, sometimes a strong personality, when two such alpha personalities meet, they sort of have to do their own thing in parallel a little bit.
Kind of like you and me.
Yeah, very much. Or me and Pepper. Yeah. Oh, Brett's still here. Hey, Brett.
Hello.
We did not forget you. Have you seen the documentary Tiger King?
I have not, but I have definitely heard that it's very popular, or was.
The main part of that I did not like was all the animals. I feel like, I've said it before, I feel like animals have their place, but it is not in a documentary. I do not feel like that is a good place to deal with animals.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I mean, if they care that much, let them make their own documentaries. People should stick to people and people topics like calendaring.
Agreed. I think there should be a documentary on Pepper.
Oh, now that would be interesting.
Agreed.
That would be interesting.
So, Mr. Brent, you have heard me talk endlessly, hour upon hour about calendaring. Have you spent much time thinking about how maybe as an outsider's perspective, how we could enhance our process or make our craft more accessible to others, or maybe some ideas that we may not have thought about to incorporate into our calendaring?
Ooh, that's interesting.
I'm glad you asked that, because I did not realize it was a hobby until obviously you started talking to me about it. And I think you pointed out several areas that you calendar that I had never thought of. And one of them that I felt was the most interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but you had talked about a calendar you keep specifically for things that you don't do. So you said, like, if you miss a doctor's appointment, it goes on that calendar. Or if you get invited to a wedding you don't attend, it goes on that calendar. And so you can look back and see all the things you could have done compared to all the things you did do. I found that very interesting. Are you still keeping up with that?
I do from time to time. I don't do a lot of social events, so you could almost say my social calendar is that calendar now. However, one of the things that I really loved about that is it was almost like living a second life. Like, you could look and see, this is what maybe the Timothy Oliphant in a parallel universe lives like. It was also a little disappointing to look back over the years of things that I did not do, especially compared to the things that I did do, because when you hold those two up together, I've lived a very boring life.
Oh, I don't believe that for a second.
No, it's true. Now, we do some things that are a lot of fun. For example, last night, Midgie and I were up to the wee hours doing karaoke. We love to do karaoke. Midgie did not hold out quite as long as I did. She gets frustrated. I tend to throw her off key with my singing. But I have fun with it. I do. Not
you
so.
Told me that. You've told me it's hard. You've told me it's hard for her to make it all the way through a song. She's usually gone in 60 seconds or less.
It is, and I feel like me not being very good at it and her being a very good singer,
well,
is part of the problem. But I don't hold anything back.
well, and you can't. Not in karaoke. That's serious business.
Not in karaoke. You cannot.
Mm-hmm.
So she went to bed early.
I also, knowing I was going to be on here talking with you, I wanted to ask about if you had either of you have any tips for someone who doesn't do a lot of calendaring but is going to buy a calendar, of kind of do's and don'ts. What do you look for in a calendar, or your calendars, I imagine in your case? But for somebody completely new, what's your buying tips?
Timothy Berkowitz is one of the best calendar buyers I have ever met.
Come on.
Your
Come
gift
on now, won't you?
Your calendar gift giving is off the rails, if I could be so bold as to say.
That is high praise coming from a gentleman as esteemed in the hobby as you are.
Well, thank you, sir.
Wow. So an important thing that a lot of new people to calendaring tend to miss is that you want to get a calendar. You don't want to skimp. I know sometimes you'll find a calendar that's cheaper, but it's the wrong year. You want to get this year. That's probably one of the best tips. Or maybe if it's toward the end of the year and you're thinking ahead, if you've calendared ahead and you're planning on what's coming up, you could buy next year's calendars as well, but certainly not last year's. That's not going to help anybody.
I've gotten some very good deals on previous year's calendars.
Well, you can. You absolutely can.
After digging into it, it was not helpful to me, though.
Right. You can use those, though. So, Mr. Lanky, you can use those to... Oh, right. Sorry. You can use those previous year's calendars and just put your new dates on them. But that you're going to have to make yourself, or you're going to have to, and I hesitate to even say it, but you may have to disassemble another current year calendar and reassemble it with the previous pictures, covers, spiral wire binding, tabs, dates,
if you're going to do that.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
I apologize. I was going to let you finish. If you're going to do that, though, I would not buy a calendar that has the picture on one side and the calendar on the other, because it's very difficult to get the pictures separated from the pages to incorporate those into your current year calendar.
Yeah, that probably a good tip if you want to try to do that is a lukewarm mineral spirits bath on the page for about roughly 24 and a half seconds. And then you'll take it out. You'll take a blow dryer on a cool setting, maybe a Conair or a, I don't think Craftsman's what I'm looking for. Another brand, but if they have a cool setting, you'll take that and you'll blow it on there, and then you'll take tweezers and slowly start prying that page apart. But man, oh boy, you got to be careful. Boy, howdy.
That is a very good money-saving tip.
Thank you.
So I am not sure if you remember this, but this is one event in my life that just spoke to me and showed me how good people can be. It was one of the most special things anyone in that job has ever done for me. I worked there for 4 years, and I can tell you that I really sincerely appreciated this. It made me feel like I was part of something. And then for the first time, and I had worked there for, I'll say 2 years at that point, but I was getting out of my car and I had a lot of boxes. It was 2 or 3 boxes stacked on top of each other. I could barely see around, full of calendaring items. At that point back then, you could still find calendaring items like the, now everyone is into big scrapbooks taking over, so it's all scrapbooking paraphernalia. But back then, just boxes and boxes of calendaring.
Stay calm, Brent. If you need to take a lap, take a lap. But
I really feel like Mr. Brent's presence here has helped me not get out of control about this. It is a subject that we are very tense about. As a matter of fact, I want to remind people while I'm thinking about the protest at the Belleville Craft Emporium. We're protesting against a big scrapbook and the Emporium labeling everything scrapbooking supplies, no calendaring supplies at all. But back to my story. So I came up to the building and several people just walked right past me like I was just in their way, taking up space. I kind of was in their way, but you shouldn't treat people like that. But I got up to the door and I was trying to fuddle with that handle, trying to get into that building. And do you know, I don't know if you remember this, you came up to me and you opened that door for me and you held that door until I had gone through it. And let me tell you, that was one of the most special things that ever happened to me at that job. And I knew at that moment I was thankful to work for you.
That warms my heart.
I didn't know that meant that much to you. I honestly, I would do that for anybody.
But you didn't do it for anybody. You did it for me. And that is what spoke to me. If I would have seen you do that for another person, I probably wouldn't have cared. I'll be honest with you. At that point in my life, I was in a place where it was all about me, to be honest. And but that meant so much to me. And I, ever since then, I think that's when I started opening up to you about what was important to me. If you, if you remember, before that, I think most of your what you learned about calendaring was from just me taking over meetings and dominating those situations.
Dominating is probably a strong word. You're a vocal advocate for calendaring, and you should never take fault with that. I don't care if it isn't a business meeting. That's important.
Well, to be fair, half the meeting's time felt like every meeting we were rehashing what you consider to be poor calendaring skills on the rest of your teammates. And I totally respect your opinion on that, but there's a time and a place for it. So anyway, back to your story. I'm glad that meant something to you. I think it did give me a chance to learn about, your craft and what you do, as I kind of asked you what was in those boxes, and you kind of walked me through why all the supplies needed to be in the office that day.
I think I made you late for a meeting, if I remember correctly.
I am sure that happened, but that's all in the past now. I'm glad that you're doing something you love.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that.
What a good man. You are a champion, sir. And I don't throw that term around lightly. This man right here is a champion. You, sir, are a champion.
It was just a door.
Well,
to you, it may have just been a door, but to me, it was a door to my heart.
Oh, like a poet.
So, I want to go back to this healthcare situation for a minute. Sure. I feel ashamed and a little befuddled to find out that we did not work for a paper company.
Befuddled is such a good word.
I agree. I like that word a lot. Though it does make my business cards make a little more sense. I will say that. But how do you think things would have been different if we had been working at a paper company instead of in healthcare?
Ooh, good question.
Specifically to different with your job?
With anything about the job. Do you think we had a lot of meetings, many of which I missed. Do you feel like, let me look at it from a different perspective. Do you feel like we would have done more of our calendaring on paper had we been a paper company?
Oh, interesting.
I never worked for a paper company, but just I would hazard a guess that if we did, the meeting still would have been about the business and about selling paper and not about calendaring. So I think it would have been about the same amount of calendaring, whether it was healthcare or paper company.
Okay.
Now, do you think we would have done less with physicians and patients if we would have been a paper company?
Probably.
Interesting.
I was always curious why we only sold paper to physicians and hospitals and doctors' offices. That was
We
always.
didn't sell paper.
Huh?
We didn't sell paper.
Have you thought maybe that would be a good side business to get into? I mean, you
Ooh.
already have a huge list of doctors' offices,
You know what?
hospitals, healthcare facilities.
I'm going to shoot from the hip here, but what about selling prescription pads to the general public?
That would be a great paper company item.
That would be good.
You're welcome to try. I don't know enough about paper companies, but I would hazard that the general public doesn't need a prescription pad.
Well, sure, because then you wouldn't have to go to a doctor to get your medicines. It would save everybody time.
Ooh, I like that idea.
Yeah,
That'd save me a lot of time.
right.
Yeah. I don't think it works that way, but again, not my area of expertise.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you've admitted you're no expert, so okay.
So, as we close out this episode, I would like to invite you sometime to join us. Calendaring Troop 4077 meets weekly. I would advise you to go on a week where the president is maybe absent or there's a stand-in. The president, I have a big problem with Eleanor, who is just very divisive, always going against everything I say, makes a lot of accusations. She feels like I take over the meetings, where I feel like I'm just offering good advice.
Is this the same Eleanor from work?
Yes, it is actually.
Yeah.
She hearing about her calendaring troop while I was working there is actually what got me involved in the calendaring troop 4077.
Right.
Yeah. She was always incredibly nice and helpful and friendly, and I felt easy to get along with. I'm surprised that you're having issues with her now.
That's interesting to me. Timothy Berkowitz has had the same view from time to time, though he has always backed me up. He has tended to back me up.
Yes.
That's interesting. I'll take that into consideration and think about that. But she rubs me the wrong way. She is a snake. She's a snake.
She can be.
She is always against anything that I put out there. Does not like me. But it's surprising to hear. I think you're the fourth or fifth person who said that same thing.
Yeah, I have no issue. I mean, I still work with her. I think she's great.
Interesting. Well, I appreciate that insight. It is a little different than the insight that I have or believe or accept or plan to continue to feel. So,
right.
But I do want to take
is
the time right now to
still dealing with that breathing issue, the fallout from the whooping cough.
Oh yes, she has oxygen on a lot during those meetings. She does.
It's loud.
It's very loud.
But it's necessary.
Well, I haven't seen anything to prove that it's necessary, but I will take your word for it. I want to take just a second to thank you, Mr. Brent, for coming on our show. I apologize about the fiasco with your last name. I really did think it was Larrabee. But again, so enjoyed having you on the show, and I'm hoping
though? I like Larrabee. Have you ever thought of changing your name to Larrabee?
I have not. But thank you for the recommendation.
Or if you're really stuck on what was Lackey?
Yes, Lackey.
Maybe Larrabee Lackey. That's fun.
Hyphenated.
Yeah.
Or that is fun to put on a calendar.
Yes, it would be. Oh, my stars.
Just about.
I think I'll just leave it alone.
Well, to each his own. That is something we always say. To each his own. We also say tomato. So
it's true. He does all the time.
Thank you again for joining us. We'll all be back next week. Well, Timothy Berkowitz and myself will be back next week for another episode of Calendar. Thank you and have a great week.
Thank you, Tim and Tim.